Tell me exactly what happened.
I came into my room, and my husband, I think he died. I think he's on the floor. I know he's on the floor. I think he's dead.
It sounds like a 911 call from a loving wife who claimed she just found her husband dead on their bedroom floor.
No, Robert, no, babe, no, please don't do this to me. No.
But even though publicly these newlyweds appeared to be in the honeymoon phase, police now say this death was a murder. And what we found even more shocking, even though police seemed suspicious of this third grade teacher's story from the very beginning, her school tells us she continued to teach children until just this month, 5 years later, when she was arrested for murder. We're on the case presented by Law & Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Police in New Mexico just made the arrest of a woman in connection to the death of her husband in 2020. And even though at the time she played the role, allegedly, of the mourning wife who found her husband dead on the floor and didn't know what happened, police seem suspicious of her story from the very beginning. This is Heather Fernandez-Hoefer. She's a third grade teacher at McCormick Elementary. It's a public school in Farmington, New Mexico. According to Facebook, on September 5th, 2020, she married Robert Hoefer. Here's a picture of the two on their wedding day. They got hitched at the local VFW. Robert served in the Navy for 9 years after high school. He went on to work on nuclear submarines, went on to graduate college in 2012, and appears to most recently have worked as a computer technician at the local library in Farmington. This couple seemed to really be in love. Robert wrote on social media, quote, "I married the most compassionate and kind woman I have ever met today. Truly a lovely and caring woman. I also gained a grandson and 3 amazing stepsons. I am a very happy man." And Heather made sure to comment with a sticker that said, "Love you." But then came a 911 call on November 29th, 2020, not even 3 months after the day they said, "I do."
911, what is the address of your emergency? Tell me exactly what happened.
I came into my room, and my husband, I think he died. I think he's on the floor. I know he's on the floor. I think he's dead. Come on, honey, wake up. He's cold. He's cold.
Heather called 911 around 5:30 in the morning, claiming she made a horrifying discovery in her house. Robert was dead on the floor.
Do you think he's beyond any help?
Yeah, I do. I do. Come on, babe, wake up, babe.
My partner
Babe, wake
is
up.
sending someone to assist you. Please
Honey, wake
leave
up.
everything
Wake
as
up.
you found it. I'm going to stay on the line with you until they get there, okay?
He's dead. He's dead. Babe, wake up, babe, wake up.
What is your name,
Wake
ma'am?
up. Hold on, I can't hear you. Hold on, let me put you on speaker.
No, you're fine.
Babe, come on. Come on. Come on, babe, wake up.
If you want, ma'am,
Yes.
if you want to try, I can give you CPR instructions.
No.
But if you think he's beyond any help,
Send somebody now, please.
ma'am,
Hurry.
they're on their way. What is your name?
Heather Hoefer.
Heather. They are
Yes.
headed that way, and I'm going to stay on the line with you until they get there, okay?
Okay.
You might have picked up on this in listening to that. Between the cries of "Babe, wake up" by Heather, the dispatcher asks if she thinks her husband is beyond needing help, if he's dead, to which she directly says yes. And then she's asked if she wants to try CPR, and Heather says no. This is one of the first suspicious parts of Heather's story. The dispatcher then starts asking about what might have happened.
Has he been sick?
Well, he injured himself
When was this?
this evening.
How did he injure himself?
He got mad. Babe, come on, babe, wake up, babe.
How did he injure himself?
He cut himself.
How did he cut himself?
Listen to me. Babe, wake up, honey, please wake up. Honey, please wake up. You can't do this to me.
Heather, if you think he's gone and there's no help, I need for you to walk out of that room and leave him alone, especially if you think this is going to be Are you telling me this is a suicide now?
I don't know.
Okay. All right.
What stood out to me there is the change in tone, the crying for her husband to be okay, mixed in with very direct responses about the narrative of what she says happened. She claimed that Robert got injured. He cut himself with a knife and then got mad. And she knows specifics to the story, but only reveals so much.
Don't do this to me. No. Oh. 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 Oh, you have to hurry.
Heather, they're coming. They're coming as fast as they can. I know it seems like it's a really long time, but they are coming.
They have to hurry. Please tell them to hurry.
My partner is, Heather. Where did he cut himself at?
His chest.
Did he do that before he went to sleep or after you went to sleep?
Before he went to sleep.
And did you know he had done that?
I didn't think we had that. I didn't think we had that. Oh, yeah, hurry, please.
Heather, I'm here with you until they get there. I'm the one that's staying with you until they get there.
About 9 minutes after Heather calls 911, police arrive. For as emotional and as heartbreaking as this phone call was, a wife who just lost her husband, police found Heather's story to be inconsistent from the beginning, according to the arrest affidavit that we have. Detectives say as soon as they started talking to Heather about her story, it changed from what she told the dispatcher in that phone call you just heard. You might remember, she said on that 911 call that Robert injured himself with a knife the night before. But to police officers just a short time later in person, she reportedly said she didn't know how Robert died and suggested that he could have cut himself with a razor or maybe he overdosed on pills. She then said he had cut himself with a steak knife. Heather then allegedly tells officers that the night before, she and Robert were in their computer room. Robert asked Heather to warm up a pie as he played video games. Detectives write that Heather suggested that Robert may have stabbed himself while she was in the kitchen and she wasn't looking. Heather claimed that Robert didn't complain when he ate the pie, but only when they went to bed later he talked about some pain in his chest. She said she then cleaned Robert's body before they went to sleep, but she went to sleep in another room on a couch. Not only was Heather allegedly unsure of the time that she noticed her husband's injuries, she said she didn't think they were that bad because she didn't think his wounds were, quote, that deep. And why did Heather not allegedly sleep in the same bed as her husband? She accused Robert of, quote, wetting the bed. Police also note that they thought Heather's demeanor was strange for someone claiming that they had just found their husband dead on the floor because she talked about her husband wetting the bed, but at the same time she was allegedly laughing and smiling. A key piece of evidence is a knife block that Heather had in the kitchen of their house. Police say she showed them that all of the steak knives were there. Police found it suspicious that Robert would stab himself with a steak knife, then return it to the knife block in the kitchen, all while his wife was preparing him that pie and that she wouldn't notice. It's another major red flag allegedly in this story. Police also point to evidence that suggests that Robert was stabbed in the couple's bed and not on the floor as Heather claims to have found him. Most of the blood was located on the bed itself, and the washing of the body that she allegedly said she did prior to his death, police think that that happened after Robert died. Let's go back to this couple's relationship because again, on Facebook it seemed like they were in true bliss. They had been married just a couple of months. Everything was great. Heather, in fact, told police that the two never argued. But as police looked further into cell phone data and spoke to one of their neighbors, it seems like there's more to that story. Police say they spoke to a neighbor who told them between 3 and 4 in the morning she heard yelling inside the home. It was unclear what the couple was talking about, according to this neighbor. Then police looked through cell phone data. Police say the data showed them that the couple had a recent argument concerning money. Robert was unemployed and Heather was the sole provider. On top of Robert, Heather also said she was allegedly footing the bill for her son, his future wife, and their 2 small grandchildren who she claimed were in the house the night that Robert died. An autopsy showed 3 stab wounds to the chest killed Robert. Heather may have claimed that she didn't think his wounds were that deep, but according to the medical examiner, they broke through the chest cavity. Police say the injuries were the kind that someone would have noticed. Police also say when they confronted Heather about how her story or stories just didn't add up, she invoked her right to remain silent and said she wouldn't answer any more questions until she had a lawyer. Robert died November 2020. Heather was just arrested April 1st, 2025. Given the amount of evidence in this affidavit that police seem to have from the very beginning, it is unclear what took 5 years for police to make an arrest. Heather's a 3rd grade teacher at McCormick Elementary, which is a public school in Farmington, New Mexico. In fact, she lives right behind the school according to Google Maps. We searched for her name in the school directory and nothing came up. But I also reached out to the school district to see if she had continued to teach in the years after her husband's death. Even though she hadn't been charged, when you read the police affidavit, it does appear that she was suspected from the very beginning, or at least the story didn't add up. It seems suspicious according to police. Heather posted pictures on Facebook in the years after Robert's death, including one where it appears she's in a classroom. It's also important to note that she did change her relationship status to single. And we wanted to know if she had been teaching elementary school kids for 5 years since her husband was allegedly murdered. I reached out to the Farmington Municipal School District, and their spokesperson tells me she's now on administrative leave, and she was actively teaching until April 1st. That is the day of her arrest this year. The district said they had no idea she was ever being investigated or considered a suspect in her husband's alleged murder. New Mexico court records show that Heather Fernandez-Hoefer is facing charges of 2nd-degree murder and tampering with evidence. Joining us now to dive into this case is retired Detective Commander Will Svilar. Thank you for taking the time to be with us, as always, on Law and Crime. You listen to the 911 call, you read through the police, the arrest report, and it just seems like police were very suspicious of this woman from the very beginning in 2020. She's not arrested until 2025. Why did it take so long?
There's a lot of factors that are involved with making the arrest. One is when the medical examiner first made a determination as the cause of manner of death, the cause of death was clear, multiple stab wounds. The manner of death was undetermined. You cannot charge somebody with a crime unless somebody says it's a crime. And until the medical examiner says it's a homicide, you can't make the charge. And in this case, there was evidence, but there wasn't a lot of direct evidence that couldn't be explained away from the way she tried to explain how she found the body. So you're building a circumstantial case, and that takes a lot longer than a case where direct evidence is involved.
What do you think was the piece that detectives were waiting on to say that she is a suspect in this murder?
So when you're building a circumstantial case, it's not one piece that does it. It's like I say, it's a puzzle. You're putting together a puzzle. You start with the corners, and then you finally get the final part. Now, when you read the affidavit for arrest, they explained every detail as to why her story made absolutely no sense, from the conflicting accounts that she gave of how the incident happened, to the ridiculous 911 call, down to the blood evidence. And it takes a while to do that. And I'm not going to say that this was their first try to get it approved either by a judge. They may have got it kicked back a few times, and they had to put more detail into how you're making this a homicide, a murder.
Let's dive into this 911 call because there's a lot of parts of it, knowing now, and you do listen to it in hindsight, knowing that she's been charged. But what sticks out to you that would have had your radar going off if you were investigating this case in 2020?
So if you're listening to the 911 call, initially she makes a report about her husband's she's on the ground, he's not responsive, he's cold. Now she's trying to tell him, wake up, wake up, wake up. The dispatcher says, would you want to do CPR? Is he beyond CPR? Nope, no CPR. He's cold. Is he beyond help? Yes, he's beyond help. Then she tells her, listen, get out of the room. If you think he's beyond help, get out of the room. Nope, she's staying there trying to talk to the guy, and then trying to bring in the fact that, oh, wait a minute, I do remember he did, hurt himself. And then they had to pull the information out of where you're saying it's a suicide. And it's just the whole ridiculous nature of that call would immediately, you'd have to look at her. And then you look at the physical evidence too. And, Part of that call was he had some pie heated up at 3 o'clock. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't the call, but it was in an interview later
Yeah.
where she said, well, he heated up some pie and had some pie, and it's hard to do with 3 stab wounds.
Well, and these were two. I mean, I know she had said initially, Heather Fernandez, that she didn't know that his stab wounds, whatever they had, that they were that deep. But then the medical examiner finds that, I mean, they broke through the chest cavity. And that just stood out to me, to have 3 stab wounds. Could someone even do that to themselves, to do that 3 times and then eat pie like it's no big deal, and then sit down and go to bed like it's a regular night and just complain of a little chest pain?
Get washed off and the whole 9 yards, put the knife back in the knife block. No, you're talking about each 2 of the stab wounds collapsed each lung.
Right.
And the other severed an artery, severed, I think it might have been the aortic artery, whichever one they decided. You're not surviving any of that for the most part. And you're certainly not going to sit down and have pie.
Well, and the way that the detectives talked about it too, I will also say, like, the fact that she talked about the way it was described, that she like washed him off before bed. I had to read that a couple times to make sure I was reading it correctly. It just seemed like a very bizarre, people may do that, but a very bizarre detail of events. And it seemed like police were just very suspicious of her, especially when she talked about him wetting the bed, and then she was like laughing as she was saying it. If you were interviewing her, how in those moments when your radar starts going off that this is a suspect, this is not what they're saying happened allegedly, how do you handle that? What are the questions you ask to try to get to the point where they might, and she didn't in this case it appears, but confess to what actually happened?
So in a situation like this where you're initially starting as an interview, it's not adversarial. You're doing an interview. Hey, what happened? Now you start suspecting, maybe they make a statement that doesn't make sense to you, or you start to suspect, this person's an offender. You have to stop him, and you have to advise Miranda at that point, because now your questions after that become adversarial. One of the things I would say to her like that, if she kept talking, is you let them talk. You let them keep saying what they're going to say. It's ridiculous. And then you'll go back at him and say, well, you know what? Help me understand how he heated up pie and then stabbed himself and then put the knife back in the block, but you didn't see it and you were right next to him. I don't understand. Could you explain that to me? And you just let them, dig themselves deeper and deeper.
It's someone's right to say that they want to speak with a lawyer present and to no longer answer questions if they haven't been charged from police. And we have a lot of defense attorneys that'll come on and say, like, anytime someone gets arrested, you should talk to a lawyer before you talk to the police. But as someone who has investigated these crimes, when someone invokes that right, what does that tell you? Do you ever look at it and say, well, that's just their right, okay? But it just seems like she cut off the conversation at that point that detectives were saying all of this doesn't add up.
Right. At the point where she realized that at this point, wait a minute, they're obviously not buying this. I can't say anymore. I've already dug a deep enough hole. Now, people would come in all the time and you advise them and they lawyer up immediately. And that's all part of it. But what I've found is if somebody doesn't lawyer up right away, they want to tell you something. Now, it's not initially going to be the true story, but if they don't lawyer up immediately, they want to tell you something. So you have to keep them talking. Again, as soon as they ask for a lawyer, or say that they want to do Miranda, or they want to exercise their rights, you have to stop.
Let's talk a little bit about the blood that they talked about in this case, because they say the police say a lot of the blood was found in the bed. He's found on the floor. She did admit to rolling him over. So he's found on his back. Had that actually happened and he stabbed himself, he dies in the room. She wasn't there. She says she was sleeping in another room. What would detectives actually seen in that case compared to what they found in this situation with her story?
Well, if he gets out of bed, if he's struggling and he gets out of bed and he falls out and dies on the floor, there's 2 ways that blood comes out of your body. If you're alive, you're bleeding because your heart's pumping. If you're dead, you're leaking. So when you're bleeding, a majority of the blood, like in this case, was going to be found in the bed where she stabbed him while he was laying on his back. and the rest of it, when it was on the floor, was leaking. So you're not going to have that intense volume of being the blood pumped out of your body by your heart. So he was bleeding in the bed and he was leaking on the ground.
There's another piece of evidence with that, which is the knife block in this steak knife that apparently is what police believe allegedly was the murder weapon that she used. It was washed off, but there were trace amounts of blood on it. How difficult is it to actually clean? Because you do hear this a lot. We were talking about one just last week where people find a knife and it looks clean, but then there's trace amounts of blood on it. How difficult is it to actually get blood off of a knife if you're trying to hide it from police?
Unless you take the handle off the knife, like knock the rivets out and take the handle off, blood's going to get in behind that, and it's nearly impossible to get rid of all of it. Now you can, but it's nearly impossible. We've had scenes not only on knives, but on, say, a floor where people will bleach and wash the floor, but we take a floorboard or the trim piece off and there's blood behind it. So she would have had to knock the rivets out of the knife and wash the handle down and then reassembled it to get all the blood evidence off. The problem with that is if it's a steak knife in your house that you use to cut up meat, there's a defense in there saying, you know what, he cut himself using that knife before.
And I also think of the fact that she was still teaching for 5 years. And we talk about this was a 2020 murder. She was just arrested in 2025, just on April 1st. And I reached out to the school district. We were talking about it. What's her status now? How long has she been teaching? And did you know that she was a suspect in the murder? Because I think in Farmington, New Mexico, I mean, it's a small town. And maybe people thought that her husband tragically passed away. Maybe there were rumors around it, but I just find it shocking that she actually went to school every day teaching young kids for 5 years.
Can you imagine if that was your kids in that school and you had a general idea of what happened? So I can't tell you how many times that I've walked people out the door knowing full well that person committed a murder. It happens all the time. But you keep building your case until you can bring them back in. Now, we operate under the justice system that we operate under. There are rights in place, there's checks and balances, and everybody's afforded those rights. And if you don't have enough evidence to bring a charge, you can't just hold people.
Would you, though, knowing that she was going to a school, and with how suspicious it just seemed from the very beginning, that it might have been circumstantial at that time, but there's just parts that don't add up to this story, is she being watched? Is she being monitored? Like, how do you handle that situation knowing that she's going to a school?
So this is obviously domestic murder.
Right.
You don't, and again, and I don't want to paint everything with a broad brush, but in a domestic murder, it's usually a victim in the household. So is the community in immediate danger? Maybe not, probably not. Again, you don't want to assume anything, but you only have so many resources to put on this lady for 5 years to watch her every move. And it does borderline on an infringement of her rights if you did that.
Yeah, it's shocking that she went, and you look at her Facebook page, I mean, she was regularly posting. She looks like a third grade teacher, and that's what she was. A couple more pieces of information I just wanted to run by you. They were apparently publicly, they looked perfect. They had just gotten married. Privately, they were having disputes over money. How common in your career is that the smoking gun where you realize that there was something going on here and there is a motive for this person to maybe in the moment get angry and, in this case, allegedly kill the person they married just a couple months prior?
It's very common, and this is why you see a second-degree murder charge and not a first-degree murder charge. Second-degree murder in Illinois is sudden and intense passion. Premeditated murder is with malice of forethought. That's first degree. Second degree murder is sudden, intense passion. And you see that frequently in domestic murders. And there's many factors. There's financial factors, there's infidelity, there's abuse, there's many factors that go into the motive of committing a murder on a spouse. And in this situation where you bring charges is, if not her, then who? It's not the two kids sleeping in the other room, the infant and the toddler. And it's not that it happened hours prior, he was dead within minutes. So if not her, then who? Which is also part of your puzzle.
And just lastly, I just think of if she is found guilty and all of this is true, She will have a trial and she's innocent until proven guilty. But I think of someone, if it's found guilty, that yes, maybe in the moment, sudden passion, it happened, but then to try to cover it up and have this phone call with 911 where you're still kind of calm in a way as you're giving your narrative of no, I don't want to do CPR. No, I think he's gone. Then police find it weird that you're like laughing during a police interview. And then you go to school for 5 years as a third grade teacher. And someone who would commit murder, it's someone you can't really reason with. But for you as someone who has been in the same room as people who've done some pretty horrible things, what type of profile of a person could we be talking about here?
So again, everybody gets angry. Sudden and intense passion is a real thing. But the thing, like you said, and they added the charge of tampering with the evidence, is this is a person that did a horrible thing and now thinks the only thing that kicks into their head is self-preservation. How can I make this so I'm not going to jail forever? Oh, I know. I'll make up a ridiculous story and I'll try to explain my way out of it, which I cannot do, and that's when they lawyer up. But it's not like this is a person that's looking not to commit murders. This is a murder that happens in domestic murder, and now they realize this is not good. I have to try to explain myself, and I'm going to get on top of it right away, and it rarely works out.
Yeah, and we'll see how this trial plays out. But to think that this was a 2020 murder, and 5 years later she is under arrest, we'll see how it plays out. Retired Detective Commander Will Svilar, it is always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Take care.
Court documents also show that Heather Fernandez-Hoefer will next be in court on May 14th. That will be for a preliminary hearing. For On the Case presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.